Mr. Sonavani is not well and unable to join us, but luckily he has sent his slides, and I shall be going through the slides of the presentation. States in India, and so the presentation really talks about a number of different points, which I believe the presentations will be made available to the participants, so I don't need to go through all the points, but really look at some of the higher level points. There is a talk of a national smart grid mission, and really the Smart Grid Forum has put together a vision saying quality power on demand for all by 2027. It's one of those rare cases where you don't see 2020, so we're actually being maybe slightly realistic in this. And it's really to transform the Indian power sector into a secure, well, I won't read through it, but the key points are reliable and quality energy for all with active participation of stakeholders. So, what are things people talk about? No power cuts, turning consumers into producers or proactive consumers, reducing T&D losses, managing the peak. That is going to be very critical because, as was pointed out in the morning's plenary, India is still a growing country, both in terms of its demand and population, and also that there's a need, not just a carbon concern, but a need for increased use of renewables. So I will not go into what is a smart grid. Consumers obviously, I think the key point is consumers in India are already well engaged with the grid, because when you have power cuts, you're automatically participating in the grid, unfortunately not in the best sort of manner. So consumers, I think, would really want no more DG sets, no more inverters. Quality of power is something that is under quantified, but clearly there's an energy loss when every air conditioner, computer, and load device goes through a voltage stabilizer. We can calculate several % of energy being wasted through voltage stabilizers. And of course, they want transparent interfacing, transparent and easy interaction with the utilities. So the utilities obviously want a reduction of losses, a reduction of their power costs, etc. So on one side, the regulator is looking at what the utilities want, and those are obviously to become a viable enterprise. Efficient, maybe more robust, so technology also plays a role. The regulator and the government really want satisfied consumers and citizens. They want viable utilities. They want sensible tariffs and, from an environmental point of view, reduction in emission intensity. So the Electricity Act of 2003 really became a mandate for broad reforms in the Indian power sector. So what it really wanted to do was promote efficient and environmentally friendly policies by opening up generation to new entities that were not allowed before, reducing the licensing requirements or taking them away in certain cases, promoting competition, etc. And so the Commission, so there was a recognition that the EA 2003 sets the policy, but the details of how these are to be done are left to state regulatory commissions who set the tariffs. And so the commissions should be guided by the factors which would encourage competition, efficiency, economical use of resources, good performance, and optimum investments. So, good laundry list or wish list, the question really becomes, how do we achieve these? And that is where the work of the regulators and work of multi-stakeholders really comes to fore. So the National Electricity Policy, interestingly enough, says there is a difference between the peak demand and off-peak. So suitable load management techniques should be adopted, and differential tariff structures for peak and off-peak supply should be taken. And of course, energy efficiency standards should be done. So even though they have not said the words smart grid, we can see that there are components of a transformation that are being discussed. So as per central government's support of smart grids, there were officially 14 smart grid pilots, and so as per publications, this is a selected list of some of them, and you can see that they span a large number of geographies around the country and a lot of different functionalities. So the proposed function is really the key, because India is still young in its smart grid journey or taking the first steps. You can see a wide range. all of the pilots have AMI as a component. You can see one thing, that advanced metering infrastructure becomes a building block for almost any other functionality that is proposed. Then you've got renewables integration, outage management, peak load management, decentralized generation, etc. A large number of different functionalities chosen in these different pilots. So some of the salient issues, all of them have AMR, we've already discussed. The expenditure is also heavily loaded towards metering equipment, little over half as per the initial proposals, and there are a fair number of ICT investments. So there is one of the pilots that's within the jurisdictional purview of the MERC, and so there you've got Baramati, talking about a 25 crore sort of an investment. Then, of course, you've got RAPDRP, which is the ongoing flagship government program. So this is a very small component cost compared to the RAPDRP investments. So coming back to how the regulator feels, regulators are really in the middle balancing the system. So instead of energy balance, we've got cost balancing, risk balancing. Regulators are risk averse, and people implementing smart grids, well, if they aren't risk takers, I don't know who is. So an example is that anything that's done will impact the tariff, because smart grid deployments are very capital intensive. So we can see that there's a capital cost, which would then have implications on financial cash flow. So then the question becomes, how is that to be put into the tariff? So if a utility has a certain number of million units or units of sale corresponding to a certain revenue, then there is a rise per unit in tariff. So in these calculations, as a hypothetical, it came to 8 paise per kilowatt hour. Now, is that fair? Is that right? That is something that really is a broader discussion. But this shows the transparency and the methodology which could be used for looking at how to put these into the rate base. So the real question becomes, how do we effect and how do we manage this change? What are technologies that are used? Are they appropriate? Are they right cost? The approvals would only come if it enhances service quality and reliability. And so there's a number of different components that go towards how we manage this sort of a process. The ground reality, as we've already seen, we have high losses, and so therefore not only do the acts, but the utilities themselves are keen on improving their operations. And so I think the regulators are cognizant of the attempts being made by the utilities. So obviously there are challenges. Some of these we've heard. Technology and finances are well-known challenges, but now you have a challenge of incentives of participation of stakeholders, lack of skilled manpower, not only from an IT, but a smart grid, which is a hybrid of IT and electrical. So we need a cloning project from Mr. Shadad Puri and Mr. Mane, perhaps. We need a transparency of the system. And of course, is there political will to really allow and effect the changes that a smart grid could enable? So it is important to involve the regulatory authorities both at a national level and at a state level, because the distribution licensees regulation is primarily at the state level. So I won't go into, in the interest of time, some of the findings from Euroelectric, but there was a publication on the regulation of smart grids, and it really talks from the utility experiences in Europe, and it essentially said, instead of a business as usual, you need new economic regulations with the need for socialization of investment. Essentially, smart grids don't just impact the immediate investor, but they impact society at large. So therefore, we need a broader accounting mechanism for smart grid investments. And of course, smart grids will not be one size fit all. So to make all of these align, we need all the stakeholders must align for the success of a smart grid project. So if we talk about what their worries are, consumers worry about tariffs. Well, utilities also worry about tariffs, but in the other direction. Regulators, how do they pass through the costs? And do we have the complementary players? This is a very interesting and important point, because you've got technology providers, service providers, even the broader technologies, forget the providers. Are they stable enough? If not, do we wait? So what's really needed is a change in mindset, and that changes from a cost plus capex basis to probably a service sort of thinking, that a smart grid is an enabler of better service, and therefore we price improve not only the service, but improvements in service. So some pilots are being undertaken like the Baramati, and tariffs should be set up to ensure that the T&D operators are granted the right incentives. So smart grids in Maharashtra, I will not go into all the details, but it's growing demand of 7 to 9% per annum, and smart grids can really, combined with DR, optimize the energy usage. So there is a need for active consumer participation, and I think the fact that we have regulators like we have in Maharashtra is a very positive sign, because they are really taking the lead in smart grids in the country. So I've benefited from Mr. Sonavani's slides. Thank you very much.